Alright, alright. Y'all need to shut up. I'm about to start class. That didn't work. Whatever, they're gonna miss out on React and then they're... I'm not good at projecting. Hey, shut up. Just letting you know, we're about to start class.
I told him that he needs to stay with the authority instead of school.
Yep, Rolando prompted it. He was like... Okay, Rolando, literally, you're the guy who's telling me to be forceful and you keep talking. Come on, dude. Yeah. Alright, we're gonna do some more React today, go a little bit more in depth to what we saw Monday. So Monday we did a lot of like rendering and stateless components and stuff, and today we're gonna talk a lot about state and how you can build forms in React and stuff like that. So Fist of 5, how are we feeling on Monday? We've let it percolate a bit. Yeah, we're feeling okay. Good, good. Great. So we're just gonna kind of build upon that. So this is a Saturday class, so you know it's a lot. So I'm going to kind of blow through these slides. If you have a question on any of them, feel free to stop me and ask. Like, I'm not going to go too... Well, I'm going to go fast. I'm probably just going to, you know, click through them real quick. But if you have a question, feel free to stop me. I'm not going to, you know, it's not a big deal. I'd rather answer your questions than waste time on the slides anyway. So, React recap. What are the building blocks of React components? Why are they awesome? Because they're great. You can split up your UI into a bunch of little pieces. You can build a nice tree of components that you can reuse everywhere, right? And so you can build them one time, use them all over the place. Components are powerful because you can isolate the concerns of each component into each component. You can kind of compose your UI, right? And you can test everything individually. What is the name of the HTML-like markup syntax? JSX. Whoa! JSX is a preprocessor step. It adds an XML-like syntax to your JavaScript that lets you embed HTML into React. HTML-like stuff that gets compiled into JavaScript. It makes it really elegant, right? Here's a live demo. Woo, it's awesome. Anyway, how can we embed JavaScript expressions such values inside of JSX with curly braces? So the JSX curly braces can be used inside of JSX code like the template literals to just embed expressions and values. Here's another live demo. Look, there's curly braces. What is the primary means by which we pass data down into React components? Props. That's a trick. We haven't talked about that yet. I don't think. Did we? I can't remember. Anyway, we're talking about that today. Props are like function arguments that you pass into a React component. So when we have a React component that is a function, your props are passed right on in. If you have a React component that's a class, they're given to you through the constructor. So they're basically the properties. They're going to be attached to the React component. And they're really intuitive to use because you use them like HTML attributes. So when you assign an HTML attribute to a React component as opposed to an HTML element, you get props that then are propagated through the React component. So live demo here. Let's see. I'm going to blow this one up. Just so you can see, I can go ahead and take the, you can see on this component we have alert and it has type danger. If I change it to success, it changes to green because props right here. Dot type, you can see this HTML attribute looking thing type equals success. Props type is used to build the CSS classes that are then associated with that HTML element. So we can change them on the fly. They're pretty sweet. Ooh. What library and method do we use to render our application's root component to the DOM? RecDOM render. Nice. It's a library separate from React that is made for working with the DOM. Any questions on that fun experiment? Good. Good question. Yeah, it was coming to you, right, Andy? It was a little too fast, though. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I know the feeling. I'm going real fast, you know, definitely. All right, so does anyone actually have any legitimate questions, or is there something that they want me to cover more in depth before we jump in? We're going to jump into an example real quick, and then I'm going to walk through the first exercise with you guys as well, as opposed to just kind of throwing you out on your own. So that should be, I think, sufficient warm-up. But if for some reason it's not, feel free to let me know. So, activity number, what the hell number is this? 10 is the one we're going to be doing right now. So let me go ahead and open it up. Open. So I can just delete this source. Woo. Oh, damn it. And we can copy it on over. Nice. Alright, we'll get the code going. I'll do yarn start. We'll start this bad boy up. It should come up on the browser. That doesn't look right. What in God's green earth? Oh, yeah, okay. Alright, I'm forgetting Bootstrap. That's what it is. Oops, my bad. Going too fast for myself. Alright, we'll go in here. Remember, we need to add the Bootstrap CDN link just right there in the HTML. If I load it up again, nice. We have a Bootstrap alert. Invalid user ID or password. I'll make this a little smaller. It's easier to see. Okay. So, this one's all the same. The index.js, nothing different here from what we've seen so far with React. This is just your basic React DOM render, the app component. We're all good, right? We're good with this file? Any explanation needed here? Let me know if you do, because now's the time. Okay, cool. So our app component. This is very similar to the example I just kind of blew through really fast. So our app component is going to render a subcomponent called alert inside of it. And alert's going to have some text. Let me just... Alright, so this is multi-line now. It needs to be wrapped in parentheses. Okay, so we have this alert. It has an HTML attribute looking thing that says type equals danger. So you can imagine when we had the Bootstrap alerts on a div or whatever, we'd give it the alert dash danger or whatever, alert dash success to change how it looks. And again, like that last example, if I just change this to a different form of the alert types in Bootstrap, I get different colors automatically. The text is a different color, the background is a different color, right? Ooh, it's kind of hard to see these colors there. Oh, it's from the angle. So something magical is happening with React that it knows it can go ahead and change what it's rendering altogether based off of this HTML attribute, right? And these are called in React props, okay? So remember, an HTML element in React when we're using JSX is lowercase. So that's going to be your usual divs, spans, p tags, input elements, forms, whatever. But they're always going to be lowercase. And we know it's a React component because it's going to have a capital letter starting, right? So alert here, capital letter, it's a React component. It is not an HTML element. And we can see here too that it's imported in. HTML elements are also not imported. They're just implicitly there. So why don't we look at the alert component and see how this bad boy looks. Expand that a little bit. So here, alert is a function, and the function takes in props. These magical props. If I go to the console, you can see this is where props are console logged. Type is success. We go back to the app. We see the type is success. So basically, we have the ability to take these HTML attributes and pass them through this function, this React function, to be able to reuse these values somehow. They end up being the properties of the React component, right? That's why they're called props. Now this React component has special properties while it exists because we've set them from the parent. And you can see these props are just used right here. We have a template literal, which creates a class. So class name is going to be our classes. So as the alert class and then as the alert dash some type. And that type is going to be whatever one we pass in with the props. And if we don't give it something, we're going to default to success. So in this case, we gave it the type success. So it's going to be alert and alert dash success for the CSS. And we can actually verify that if we go look at the elements. We can open up the div ID root, and there you go. You can see it has alert and alert dash success for the class. So the props are literally passed in, and they're used as legitimate values in the HTML that's eventually rendered. The other one we have, if we look again at the console, we have that type is success, but we have this children one. Now children is peculiar. You'll notice here that it's just in curly braces in the middle of this div, which is kind of wild, right? And if we look up the app, you can see that what's rendered in that div, that alert div, is this invalid user ID of password, right? This text. If we look up the app, we can actually see that text. So there's a special prop when we're using these props in React. There's a special prop that exists called children, and that is everything inside of your component. Everything that's literally put inside of it in terms of like your HTML type look, right? This can be anything. It can be just some text like this. It can be another React component. It could be HTML. It could be a Boolean. Whatever. Whatever it ends up being is your children. That's your children, right? It could be some expression or a function or something. It needs to end up being some valid form of HTML or something. But text is valid HTML. And we can see that here. We're literally just rendering literal text. So to show you, I can actually change this. P class name. We'll just wrap it in a P tag. And we'll just see how that changes in the console log. So here are our props again. Ooh, nice. Children now is no longer just text. It's a bunch of, this is what React compiles to. A bunch of weird, nasty, ugly object-like thing. But it still looks effectively the same. It's a little off because there's a P tag in there now. But props children still renders fine. We still have the text. So the child props are literally anything you put inside of that parent component. Automatically pass through the props as children. No matter what. That's a good question. So here, really quick, before I get to that, you can see I removed the children. There's nothing in there anymore. It's not coming through this object. Just type. So, no matter what, we nest these. What are the children? Well, here, if we look at this example, again, the children are, well, there's only one, and it happens to be a P tag. But that one has its own props with its own children of invalid user ID or password. So the P tag here is its own React element with its own children, which happen to be this text, and our alert only has one child. And that is the direct, immediate element that's nested in it. If we want to have multiple children in there, we can. Now our children is an array of 2. Because these are at the same level, right? Just directly in the root of that React component. Why don't we look at the success? So I'm going to make this danger again, so we can see it turn red. Turns red. It's good. You can see the props changed right here. Again, they're console logged right here. So when this is rendered, oops, what is going on? I can actually remove this. Now the type is gone. It's just the children. And right here, this is where this kicks in. Because there is no type, because that's undefined, if I tried to log that out, it would literally say undefined. These double pipes say, okay, because this is undefined, then instead use success. So if we look at the HTML element, right in here, it still is alert success. It also has those 2 children directly nested inside of them. Yeah, we already are nesting more text, but why don't we nest something else? Or actually, even better. So now if we look at our console, we have an array of 2. We have our first child. Our first child is going to end up being a button that has some more children, which has some more children, which ends up being the text. So we get this big graph of just a React component with all the children that you could follow all the way down, but the only one that's really important for this component and for this component, right here, this alert, the only ones that are really important are the immediate children, which are these p tags. If you wanted to go further down the chain, you'd have to manually do it, and it could get real messy, and you'll probably make a mistake. Now, is this alert component somehow bound to having this type as a prop? No. We don't have anything in here right now. There are things that do that, but we don't have anything in here right now saying we're limited to only the type prop. We could give it another one, and we could call it inner text or something. Hello world. And if I save it, my props has grown. Now there's a third one called inner text. And in here, I can actually write it out. And boo, there it is. Notice it's after the children. So React's somehow rendering all of the children first, and then it's rendering my inner text hello world. Or I can move it up and do hello world first. But there's nothing constraining what props come through this React component. What else can we pass through? Good question. Why don't we... Whoa, dude. Why don't we pass in a function? Actually. Now, inner text can't be rendered anymore. I'm going to actually change the name of it to inner fn, inner function. So you can see it still logs in the props. There's inner function right there. And I can actually props.inner function. Call it. It's a function. Whoa, dude. Anything can be passed in through props. Anything. Functions, objects. Like, why don't we go ahead and do that? Style, for instance, that's ends up being a prop. So why don't we have a custom style? We'll call this one my style to not confuse you with actual style. So that's another important distinction. I'll show you what happens when I change this to just style, and you can see how that affects it. Font size, we'll just say 10. So now you can see I have a new prop called my style, which is an object. I can pass in my style, and I could say something like style equals props.myStyle. Style. Makes the text a little smaller. Right? Remember, style is just an object. Now, here's one though. Style itself is a typical prop. What do you think is going to happen when I set style right there to font size 10? Is it going to change the font? You think so? Doesn't do anything. Yeah, I'm giving it 100. Doesn't do anything. I'm not applying the style anywhere. I'm giving it to the React function as props, and it's coming out. I can show it, but I'm not actually applying it anywhere because I'm not applying it to HTML elements, right? So if I do here props.style, well, there you go. Now they're applied. So you can't just apply style magically to a component. Components don't have any real attributes, right? They're just functions or classes that then end up rendering HTML. If you want to apply style to a component, you have to take that style prop down and manually apply it to the HTML inside that it renders. Question on props? Yep, Nor? Properties. No, you're not stupid. Everyone in the community calls it props, and I guarantee you there are people who've been using it for a while who never even think that they're properties. They just call them props for some reason. Shorthand. I don't know. But I can guarantee you that you'll run into people who'll be like, you know, set the React properties. And they'll be like, what? You mean props? You know, well, they're the same thing. Any other questions on these props? What you can do with them? You can do a lot of things with them, obviously. This is how we pass data through our React application. You guys can probably start to see that now. And why we don't need things like jQuery anymore. Because now we can kind of tell it how to render with these props. And that's what we're going to get into in a moment. Alright, so let's start the next activity. So you can go ahead and try to do the calculator props activity 11 by yourself, but I'm actually going to walk through it. We're just going to do it together. So I want everyone to get it ready. Get the unsolved. You're going to have to delete the source of a React Create app, little app, right? You have to replace the source with what you have it unsolved, and then we'll work through it together. So let me open that up. Alright, so we have some source here. I'm going to delete this source. We're going to copy that source. Boom. Let me open up this. Alright, so let's open up the README. Let's look at the README really quick together. So the instructions: replace your React application source with the unsolved source. Stop the dev server, it's already running, or you're going to have some problems. And then you can go ahead and restart it with yarn start. If you open up the localhost 3000, you'll see what you have already. And then we're going to take a look at the calculator.js file. There are some divs in there, so why don't we look at them. Open up components, calculator.js. So there are some divs with question marks. We need to create a math component and render one math component in place of each question mark. The math component should perform some arithmetic using three props. Num1, which is a number. Operator, which is going to be plus, minus, times, or divide. And num3, which is another number. The math component should render the result of the problem in a span tag. E.g., we're going to get 19 plus 341 equals 360, and 360 is going to be in its own span. Any questions? Alright, so I'm going to Slack out the React docs for you, too, so you can go ahead and take a look at these after if you'd like. Why don't we look at them really quick, take another look, just see if there's anything new about props. So it talks a little bit about, you can go to the detailed API reference if you want. Components are like JavaScript functions. They accept arbitrary inputs called props and return React elements describing what should appear on the screen, right? So here's some examples of how props can be used. Here's an example of a prop with a class. There's a lot here that could help you. Are we going to need this as a class or not? I don't know. With React, it's always a good idea to try to start your component as a function and only turn it to a class if you absolutely need to. Now, we haven't had to use a class quite yet because we haven't talked about state. And that's really the only reason to use a class is when you have to manage state. So, theoretically, none of our app has to be a class. They can all be functions at this point because we're still not going to have any state. It talks a little bit more about how things render and stuff like that. You can check it out later if you'd like, but why don't we walk through this now together. Alright. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create another component, right? So let's open up our components, and we wanted this one to be called math. So this is going to be math.js. Alright, creating a component. What's the first thing we need to do? Import React. Excellent. Now, React components always start out as a what? As a function, right? And what's the rule about the names of these functions? They have to have a capital letter. So math. We know we're going to need some props, so we'll pass in the props. Okay, we have our math function. before we start working on the actual functionality, what's the next thing we should do? Export default. Why? You said it. Why? It's what they all do. Yeah. Because we need to get to it, right? We need to get it from other files. So if we don't export it, can't get to it, right? Default doesn't matter, but if you don't do default, then you have to explicitly reference it by the word math. Now, we can go over that in a moment. It's a library called math, yeah. No, it should be fine. We'll find out, won't we? So just to test that this is working, why don't we return a div, or actually a span, I am math. Have it say something stupid to just represent this component. So we can go ahead and bring it into our calculator, and I'll open these next to each other. Export default, allows us to do this. We can name that math component whatever we want, and it's still valid. So if we put it right here, we have our math component. If we just do export math, or it'd have to be export function math, then here we need to explicitly reference it by name. So that's a named export, and the other one is a default export. We prefer default exports with components because the only thing that file should export is the component.
So the default will export every component in the file.
It will export what we tell it to. But that's the default, which means you don't have to reference it by name. You can do it like this. So we can call it whatever we want. In this case, I'll call it math component, right? So right here, if we go ahead and do yarn start, we should be able to see I did math or whatever. We just put I am math right there. This is what you should see if you're following along. Everyone good here? Yeah, got some thumbs up. Anyone have any questions so far? We've created a new component. We had it render something kind of trivial, and we rendered it in our parent component. All right, let's go into the functionality a little bit. So, remember, we can leave it running. We'll have hot reloading. If we look at the README again, we're going to need 3 props. That's the next thing we want to do that are going to represent math. The num1, which is going to be a number, operator, and num3, we'll call it num2. Num2, which is going to be a number. So we're going to have those 3 props. So why don't we work on those props next? So in this first math component, how do we define props? With curly braces, what do they look like? HTML attributes, right? The prop looks like an HTML attribute. So we have num1, and in this case, the first num is going to be 19, right? Because we're doing 19 plus 341. Then we need our operator. That's just going to be a string. We'll set it equal to plus, because that's what we're going to do. And then we want num2, right? Not num3. And that's going to be 341. Now we have all 3 props. All well and good. If I look at the screen, nothing has changed. Why don't we just console.log props in here to make sure that they are coming through. Now if I go into this, I should be able to open up my props. There you go. My props. So we should all be here. Our props should be being passed through. We can now see them. We can use them in math if we wanted to. Now the way I'm doing things right here, one step at a time. I'm going to make this plus operator work before I do anything else. I want this math component to be completely done before I worry about minus, multiply, subtract, multiply, or divide. I'm doing this in small chunks so it's easy to test. Okay, I can easily test it just visually, and I can test every line of code without having to worry about much, right?
Move that over.
Which, this right here? Yes. Think so? Yeah, I forget it kind of cuts off here. It's a pain. So, the first thing we need to do now that we're in this is we need to read the, we're going to have the numbers and we're going to have to read the operators, see what we got to do. So, we can do let result. We can just set a result equal to 0 because we know we're going to need to set it. And then we already know we're going to have potentially 4 operators. So if we're going to have to do 4 similar like comparisons, what's the best thing for us to do? A switch, exactly. So we're just going to switch on props.operator, right? And we already know our first one is going to be a plus. Set a break, and then we'll just do a default. And we'll do nothing. Just to get the squigglies away. You don't necessarily need to do this. But good. Okay, so we know that the operator is a plus. So what are we going to do? We're going to set result equal to props.num1 plus props.num2. Why? Because we know that the plus operator is telling us we need to add things. So we're going to go do that adding right here. And then right at the very end, we can display the result. Bada bing, bada boom. I'm going to rename this math component now just to math, so it's a little smaller. Verify when you do that everything still renders. We're good, we're good. All right, finish this. Leaving the rest for you. You can work in groups, that's cool. But I got you started. Now I want you to do the last 3 operators. Subtract, multiply, divide. Yep, it's going to be very similar to that, yeah.
3 and then 4 and so forth, because you don't want the number one to be the same or repeated, right? Or is that
But that's a good question. Will they be repeated in separate components? If you create a second math component with num1 and num2, will it override the first component?
I don't believe so, since they're kind of...
It won't. They're different, right? It's like calling the function twice. If you call a function twice, does the second call change what happened in the first call?
So they're basically separate.
They are
So
separate.
they can let them do math, but you can still name it num1.
Yes.
Not gonna feel like the first one.
Yes. Because they're functions.
That's much more easier, because I can imagine like num like 4 to 4 to 6.
Yeah, that would be impossible to manage, right? So let's spend a couple minutes trying to finish this.
Do we have to manually process the numbers? There's just no way for us to like read the.
Not we'll get there, but not now. Pass the numbers in manually. Reading that text now would be really hard, but there's other things you could do. We could build a real calculator, you know, where you press buttons and stuff.
Why is there a colon for default rather than a semicolon?
Because it's a switch, and after every case in the switch, you have to do a colon. That's just the way a switch is. So when you have multiple cases, they'll end with colon, and default's just like, I didn't match anything. I'm only going to give you like 5 minutes to finish this, so not a lot of time. As a bonus, if you finish, use a style tag to change the font size of the span to be something crazy, like maybe the size of the result or something. So whatever this result is, change the style and the span to have font size of that result. That's a bonus. Change the style on the span that you're returning to have a font size equal to that of the result. You can do it, Rolando. I have faith in you. All right, let's go over this. Whoa, 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 whoa. Calm down. You want one more minute?
No.
All right, I'll give you one more minute. I like your socks. I have a pair that I sell every year for Christmas. I get a bunch of weird socks. I have a pair I really love. They're a great white shark, like eating some prey or something, jumping out of the water. It's the literal like picture of a great white shark eating something. They're rad. I have no idea where they went though. It really makes me sad. There's like blood all over them and stuff, you know, because it's ripping this seal or something to shreds. It's amazing. It's perfect to wear on customer visits. Oh, you like to see my socks? You're a meat producer. You cut up animals all day. No. But every now and then someone will send us some meat. And we'll share it amongst the office. Or hot sauce or something. Alright, now we're gonna go over it. I gave you 3 minutes. 3, I was being generous. Okay, so we have this first one working, right? So it did plus for us. So quickly, what we know we need to do is at least we need to replicate this math, right? It's gonna have to change slightly. The first change we know we gotta make is we have to change the numbers. So this one has 42 for num1, 17 for num2. This one has 100 for num1 and 3 for num2. This one has 4 for num2 and 96 for num1. Now the other thing we know is the operator is different. This one is subtract. This one is the product. And this one is the quotient. Right? So this is a multiply right here. This one is divide. This one is subtract. This one is a plus. Now if we look at what we have, it should all still render, but we're going to get a bunch of zeros, right? Because we have our default case of doing nothing. And those operators don't match anything yet. So the next thing we need to do is what? Add the other operators. So on this side, we can go ahead and copy this case. First one is subtract. The second one is multiply. And this last one here is going to be divide. Now if we open it up, should get what we expect. Cool. Then there was a bonus. And the bonus was to change the font size based off of the result. So, font size is style. How do we set style? Style equals what? Backticks? Yeah, no, it's an object.
Yeah, I was trying to actually just...
So we can set the font size property to that of the result. And what we get is this mother of God. These crazy numbers. 360 pixels, that's pretty big. It's right there in your face, so you know. Ah. Oh, I see, yeah. Any questions on this example here? How it all worked? How these math components work? How props work? How any of this works? What are we doing here? Who am I? I don't know. No, we're all good? Fist of 5 on that example then. Pretty good.
Question. Can you put like the JSX inside the style?
Ah, no, you cannot.
I was trying to do that at first for some reason, but it wasn't working.
No, if I tried to do any JSX in here, it would break because this is an object. It's not a React component.
Yeah, and then I tried to make an object which was JSX after the object, but I don't know, I was confusing myself.
Yeah, it's okay. There's a lot to go over right now.
Okay, I missed something somewhere. I'm not getting a result at all.
Okay. Here, right here is my final file. We have a result right here that defaults to 0. We set it in each one, and then we pass it into the span. And then over on this side, we have our num1 operator and our num2. Hey, Chris or Stephanie, one of you want to see why yours isn't quite working? Cool. Okay, Garrett, did you have a question on this? Ah. Can you?
I think you can. I just didn't try it.
You think you can?
It's way easier on the left side for you than the right.
So could you put the style here, and would it change the style everywhere else?
Yeah. So you could just take that and just
What if I set this to 72 though? Would this work?
No, because then you have a property called style.
You're right. No, it won't work because then I have a property called style. What did this break or something? Oh, I must have broken it.
So can you even use the props in that calculator at all?
In this calculator?
Yes.
Nope. The props belong to this function here. So I can't use them out of here. Result is not a magical prop. It doesn't get added to the props. It's totally in this function. I can't get it out. Alright, let's go ahead and shut down that server. Let's move on. Alright, now you're going to do an activity on your own. Activity number 12 is going to be the friends list. And what you're going to do is, you're going to have this application that has 3 components. One that renders SpongeBob, one that renders Mr. Krabs, and one that renders Squidward. It's going to look something like this. And you're going to take these components that render all 3 of these guys and turn them into a single component that renders them based off of the props. So you're going to be refactoring this. So there's a lot to this one. Work in groups. Try to get it done. Give 15 minutes on it, and then we'll go over it. This is 12, yes. You get all of that. There's a JSON file that has all the information for you. So you don't have to make the images or anything like that. It's there. But you need to refactor it to a single component. So you have this friends JSON that you get, has all the information you're going to need to render them. And you can use it from inside of here or something, I don't know. You have to figure out exactly how to make it work so that you can take Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Squidward and turn them into one single component that just takes in props.
You know what?
You don't have the README on your computer?
No, I do. I just leave.
No.
I was looking back up and down. I'm only working with 13 here.
It's true, it's true.
I need another one. I'm gonna bring a screen to my. I don't have enough screen.
Kerry King, Marty Friedman, and Kirk Hammett. Okay. Yeah, I guess Marty Friedman's been out of the thrash scene for a while, so you can't keep him in there. Even though he was by far the best one to ever be in the scene.
Those ends were brutal, dude.
Once again, relying on the guy that has the worst freaking
Really, you gotta move that unfold over to where they're at. So I guess you could turn that into a rack. Yeah, create that rack.
It's we'll fix it by creating a brand new component and rendering it once for each frame. Great. We're going to create that out. And then just move it.
All right, let's go over this example. How was this one? Boo? This one was there was a lot. This one was thick, right? Okay, so if you remember in the structure, originally we had Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Squidward, but actually we can distill them into a single component, make it a little easier for us. So if we take a look at that component, if you would have looked at those three, you could see that there's things they shared. They had a name, an occupation, a location, and an image. And what we just learned from props was, if we know what information we're going to need in that component, we can pass them down as props, right? So here we just took that static information, and let me see if I can pull it up really quick. So right here, for instance, we have Mr. Krabs. And right here, we have our new version. So Mr. Krabs, name, occupation, and location. And then the image, right? And then on this one, we have the same stuff. If we go back, we look at SpongeBob, we can again see similar stuff in SpongeBob that we can distill into a single component. This is where components get powerful. Traditional jQuery or whatever would probably have some duplication there, right? We might have all three of them written out kind of like in this original, this is the naive React way, right? Before we really understand how components can be used. But you can distill all of that to a single one. Now, how do we use this friend card? Well, we're given a list of friends from this friends JSON, right? And we know that the friends come in as an array. So this is the first friend, second friend, third friend. You literally reference the information from each friend as props for the friend card. And you have 3 friends. See? 3 friends. So if you want to see how this friends card function actually looks and what the props look like, console log. Make sure you console log the props so you can see a little bit more what's going on. And there I can see here SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward. You could also console log friends if you wanted to see what friends look like. Get a view of an array. Kind of get a view of the data that you're working with, right? So depending on what the data looks like and how similar it is, you can decide how to distill that into similar like components. So again, when we want to make a change to this friends list, the power that we have now is we could go ahead and go to the friends card or whatever it's called. Closed it. You can go here to this friend card and we could say add a style to it. Let's just say we want to make the background red. Applies to all of them. So we have these changes that we can apply quickly to our entire application because the whole thing's using this friends card. Questions on sharing these components and anything that happened in here? What was particularly challenging about this exercise? Figuring out what to put in the friend card? Figuring out what information to pull out?
No, like just the batch structure. I didn't even realize it was going to be just all that.
What were you expecting it to be? What were you trying to think towards? Okay. Okay, it's good to know. I'll go back and address that. So, the important thing to remember here is your React components are comprised of the HTML, right? And when you have that similar HTML, you can take all those like components and you can just blow them away and come up with one that's effectively the same and use props to change the data that's actually rendered. So we're taking advantage of the props here to use the same structure and render different data for different friends based off of the information we're giving the component. And that's where React becomes really, really powerful. You can imagine if we had to display 50,000 friends, it'd be easy. We just have to have a list of 50,000 and we just enter them all in. Now, it wouldn't be so easy because we still have to write a friends card for each friend, right? And that part's kind of irritating. So, how can we make this even better? How can we take this to the next level? Well, we know that friends is an array, right? What function do we know about with arrays that lets us change what the array looks like? Map? For each? Why would we want to use for each or map? Which one would we prefer in the scenario and why? So we want to take the list of friends. There's 3 lists of friends, and for each friend, we want to loop over them and print a friend card. Do we use a for each, or do we use a map? Why would we use the for each? Can't we map? I mean, JSX is just JavaScript, and what we're doing is taking each individual element in the array, changing it, and returning that as a new array. We're technically mapping over this data. So why don't we see what that looks like? Now remember, we can put anything we want in curly braces in React. Any expression or anything. We already know we have friends. Well, some would say. So we can map over them. And return a function. Now the friend card, they all have a similar shape, right? Turns out, because JSX ends up being just JavaScript, you can use it in functions. Just arbitrary functions. Da 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 da. Same thing. So because this is an array, to make it even easier, now I could render as many friends as I want. It doesn't matter. You could put Kerry King in there and Kirk Hammett and all those guys. No problem. You can add just to the friends JSON. You can imagine that the friends JSON file is your return result from an AJAX call, for instance, right? Now you can render it. You just use this map. You pump the friends in there, and voila, you happen to have all these components. So this is where it starts to become even more powerful. Now we have a shared component, and we can render everything that has that shape into these components with a simple map. We don't have to do anything crazy. We don't have to manually write it out. Now this is really dense code right here. It's hard to kind of understand exactly what's going on because it's passing through a bunch of stuff. You know, we're passing through props. We're mapping over a function. There's a whole lot happening. You'll get more used to this style, and it'll be a little easier to understand up front. But for now, it's pretty dense. However, it's possible to do this. Again, I'll stress this again. JSX, which is what these components are, is just JavaScript under the hood. Doesn't look like it. It looks like HTML, but it's not. It's just JavaScript. And because of that, it can be used and returned in functions like anything else. You can change it. You can do whatever you want to it if you know how to. And if we're just returning stuff, no problem. Just return it. Yes. Do you want me to just slack out this whole thing?
Not that one, but the one where you're actually
Just
building.
yeah. Please.
That one. Yeah, that one.
Why just a friend card?
Just do everything. I can write off the other one.
Oh, okay.
This one is like there's a lot.
Well,
I might miss.
is there a lot here? You already have this, don't you?
Yeah.
Go ahead and take the SpongeBob one. And instead of having the image hard-coded in, change it with props name and props image. Instead of having the name hard-coded in, replace it with props name. Instead of having the occupation, change it to props occupation. And you've got the same structure. This already exists for you. And that's where the powerful part is, right? Because this structure existed forever. You just had to change those hard-coded things to reference props. And you're done. Now, obviously, it's not so easy to just see that. I'm making it sound a little easier than it actually is, because it's pretty hard to understand. That's where React's power comes from. But once you get props and you get these React components, it'll be easy for you. Make sense? TAs will slack out the actual solution. Mine has this added loop in it, this little map here, so I'm going to slack out mine as well, because you're going to need it for the next exercise. So I'm going to leave it right here right now. I'll slack it out in just a second. They're going to slack out the actual solution right now. That was 12. Does anyone have any more questions before we move on, though? Because I have to zip this up and all that jazz. Let me send it to. Well, I might be able to do it from here. Oh, yeah. Actually, look. Alright, never mind. Look at that. That was 12. Oh, no, that's not where it is. That's not where it is. Hold on, I'm getting it for you. There we go, we got it. Alright, my solution's been uploaded too.
Solution 13.
Yes. Solution 13 is mine. Oh crap, it's 12. Whatever. Solution 13 is my solution to activity 12. Alright. Next activity, we're just jumping right in. Is activity 13. So, what you're going to have to do with this one is something similar to what I just showed you. There's going to be a list component, and that list component's going to have some props. They're going to be groceries. And you're going to have to render those groceries as components with a map. So what I just showed you, you can use the example that I just slacked out is like a like kind of a helper. You're going to need to do in activity 13. That boy's going pretty hard too. And so is my laptop. It's warmer in here today than it normally is, so. What if I could just shut this thing off since I'm... I know what I'll do though, I'm scared.
Put it on the screen. The other side of the monitor.
I really like Joey, he's a nice guy. Alright, let's go over this one. Okay. So what we had to do, basically, was take this list of groceries, which are passed into this list object as props, and we need to use a map to display them as list elements, list items, right? Where the text is going to be their name. So if we just do yarn start, get this bad boy running. See, we just have that text, nothing too exciting. So if we look at the shape of the groceries again, we have an ID, and we also have a name. So remember, you're going to need the curly braces because that's how we can render everything in React. So we need this to be an expression. We have groceries, right? And we can go ahead and map them. Let's call this G. Here we can start defining our list item. This is just a class that they gave in the solution. You don't need to. But if you wanted to go ahead and style it, you could. And inside of that, we need to display the item. Whoops. My God. Alright. Oh, I called it G, that's why. Stupid. So the solution called it item. I was reading the solution. I'm a lie, I'm a sham. Anyway, so that renders them, technically, with that map. However, if we go ahead and look here in the console, each child in an array or iterator should have a unique key prop. Did anyone run into this? Did anyone find the solution to this? So what it's saying is when you're rendering a bunch of elements, you need a special prop on the elements that you're rendering that are similar, called the key. And the key is used by React to say, okay, I'm going to render a big list of stuff. And when I go and I get new props and I'm about to re-render, I can match up the keys that currently exist, and if the keys have changed, so if there's some that are gone or some that are added, I know for sure that I have to re-render. But if the keys are all the same, I might not have to. And so it's like a faster way for React to check really quick to see if there's any differences at a high level before it has to re-render stuff. And you definitely need it. Otherwise, you're just going to get weird bugs. Now you'll notice that the error is gone. Let's have that key. It doesn't change anything, it doesn't do anything, but it makes React more efficient. Now, there was a bonus too, and that was to filter the groceries that were not purchased, right? You only want to see the groceries that have not been purchased yet, because we want to purchase them. So here we can do const props dot groceries dot filter, and we can go ahead and put this on the next line. I'm going to go ahead and move this down so they're all on the same line. There. Make it a little easier to see. So where G is not purchased, we're going to get all the groceries that haven't been purchased yet. And instead of props.groceries, we'll just do not purchased there. Now what happens? Oh, only the not purchased groceries. Cheese, cake mix, carrots. Cheese, cake mix, carrots. Any questions on this example? How the map works? What's going on here? Where are we? Anything? Fist of 5, how are we feeling right now? We've done a little bit more today with React. It's getting a little bit more complicated. Slowly, that was very like hesitant 5, Garrett. It's like you got the list, but not the style. Yeah, it's probably bootstrapping the. Yeah, if you have Bootstrap, you're good. Any other questions?
So explain the key again.
The key needs to be something unique. It can't be the index of the array, and it's used by React to say if the keys are changed, I know I have to re-render the whole list.
So it's usually just the ID.
It's usually an ID, yeah. So if your element or item has an ID, then you use that. If it doesn't, then you can generate one for it, but it has to be unique, and you want it to be something that will be similar every time you run this code. You don't want it to be something that will change every time you run it, because then React has no idea if the keys are actually the same or not, right? Because they'll always be different. There's no idea if the elements are the same. So the key is an efficiency thing on React's end. So if you ever have a list of elements that you're rendering, you need a key. 100% need a key. Any other questions? We're going to look at one more quick example before we take a break. I'm trying to crush all this stuff in so we can actually finish it today because this is a Saturday class and it's not a short one. Cool. So Stephanie, Chris, one of them will Slack out the solution to this activity 13 so you can look at that map if you want. Let me go ahead and copy over some code again, as always. All right.
In your list file,
Yeah.
you're not using curly braces for the function because you're only returning that one list element, correct?
Yes. Because I'm only returning one element, it's like the arrow function with implicit returns.
Just separate them.
Except I'm returning a React component. It just needs to have parentheses around it. Alrighty. So now, what we've seen today and what we saw, so what we saw Monday was just basic rendering of React components, right? So it was just the minimum you can do to get something to work with React. And the basics of the syntax and all that. So far today we've seen props, so how you can pass data down from one component to another to make React re-render it or kind of change how it looks without you actually doing any extra work in the HTML, right? So we're starting to get to that point. Well, now we're going to look at what we can do to manage state in our application. So if something happens and we want to keep track of that, we can. And we do that with stateful components. So here we have a counter component, and app is all the same, nothing changed. But in our counter, it's now a class. So this has changed. So here, I can start to click the counter, and until I refresh the page, my count stays. So this is pretty important, right? I mean, we use jQuery kind of for this now, and that's kind of how we handle it on our UI, or we're just using handlebars, and every time we do something, we just get the data back from handlebars, right? We'll get it back from our Express server, and handlebars will re-render it and all that jazz. So we don't really keep a lot of state on the UI. Minimal stuff with jQuery, but for the most part, when you need something, you have to re-render. So in our traditional example, if we were doing it today, we'd have this counter, and counter would probably call an AJAX call that would send the new count back to our Node Express server and keep it on the server, and then send back a new, it could send back like a new handlebars page with the new count. Or you could use jQuery, I guess, right? But if you wanted to actually keep track of that state from the server, you would have to do all these server calls. Well, now with React, our component can just nicely keep track of that. So we don't necessarily need to call back to the server, or we don't need to show the user that we're calling back to the server. We can update the state visually on the front end and call back to the server on the back end, like behind the scenes, and the user doesn't ever know. So it's kind of a tricky way that you can make things seem like you're keeping it all there and you're up to date and all that stuff. So anyway, what does this look like? Well, we have a React component now. It has to be a full class. No more function here. Not on the, not with state. Now, technically, with the latest version of React, that's not true anymore, but we're not getting to that in this class because it's a far more sophisticated feature of React. So just know, if you need state, you're going to have to create a class. Class, name of your component, extends react.component. So the one nice thing is now we're actually using this React that we import, so that's cool. But we have to have this class. And then you just export default to class like we've been doing. Nothing crazy. Now, what we've been seeing so far with those functions is effectively this. there's a render function on every component, and that render function is called when React actually renders that app or that component to the screen, right? To the UI. And in there, it just returns the HTML that you're going to render. So those functions we've been building so far are effectively just this render function. That's all they are. We just added a whole bunch on top of the render function. For instance, we have the state. You can define it like so, where you have state is a variable equals some object, and it has a count property of 0. Also, this class has a function on it, handle increment. This is going to be our event handler. Okay? So we used to do on, click, or whatever, and then we'd register an event handler, and all that fun stuff would happen. But now we can actually just build a function, a normal old function, onto our class, and use it in a totally different way. So the other difference with state is we no longer use this.props to get to it. We use this.state. This.state does not get passed through the constructor. It doesn't get passed into a function or anything. It just belongs on the class. It's right here. This bad boy is this.state. And when we want to call a function that's on the class, we can reference it with this.function name. And this is how you register an event handler in React. So remember, the curly braces can be literally anything, even a function. This is taking in the function name. So this is like the, if you were to do on click and you were to give it a named function instead of an anonymous function, it would look kind of like this, right? So the jQuery version would probably be $, it'd be like $, a button, dot on, click, this, dot handle, increment. That's what the jQuery version would look like. Now we're just embedding handle increment into these curly braces. And it's going to know when I click that this function's got to be executed. It's pretty smart like that. So if I go here, we can go ahead and open up the console, look at the sources. If we look at the non-compiled source, you can actually set a breakpoint in here. And when I click, boom, there's this state, which you can't read right now. Oop, says it's undefined. It's having trouble. But it's going to work. So for some reason it can't get to it here, which is a bummer. So it's not perfect, the debugging, but you can see that it's still hitting this breakpoint, so we can see exactly where this function is occurring every single time. Now if I wanted to, I could go into the code, this is a good thing to do because you can see like what the state is and how it's going to change. I can also, in this render, rendering this.state.count. So state only has one property, count. Clicked. Alright, so now we got some console logs, so we can kind of watch this a little bit better. So if I open this up, go to the console, rendering with the initial state of 0. I click it. It says clicked. I hit this breakpoint. I hit F8. Look at the console. Rendering 1. Interesting. The render function is called again when my state changes, right? Because that clicked function is changing the state. Render gets called again. Every time I do click, you'll notice that clicked is increased, and the rendering is called again eventually. Now here's a tricky thing. Look at this function right here, this handle increment. It's calling another function called setState. SetState has the same shape. What we're passing in here has the same shape as our initial state. It doesn't necessarily have to, but in this case it does. And what it's doing is basically saying this count right here in my set state, whatever this new value is going to be, should eventually replace this. So I can use it. And when React decides to finally change your state, it calls render again. Now here's what's tricky. The clicked call is after we set the state. However, it's not going up before the render. That state has not been changed until that render is called again. Set state is a function, and it's given to React, and it tells React, when you get back to it, you need to re-render my component with this new state. But for now, do your thing. And React will say, okay, great, I know that I'm going to eventually re-render the component. It'll take the new state. When it gets to it, whenever that time comes where the virtual DOM's like, we're going to do it again, it'll compare the states, and if they're different, it'll re-render it with the new state. Nothing's changed, there's nothing to do, so it won't do anything. So set state is not used to immediately change the state. So you may be asking, well, why don't we just immediately change the state? Ooh, uh-oh. Oh, man. Doesn't actually do anything. I can click all day long, my count is going up, but it's never re-rendering. My God. What have we done? That is because setState is a very, very special function that, again, tells React it is time to change. If you never call it, React has no idea. It does not care that this random variable you just changed. It just literally does not. Which is advantageous in a lot of ways, because that means you can change variables all day long and not affect anything, but still change them in the class. And until you want everything to re-render, when you're done with your computations, then you can call setState and re-render everything, right? So again, until that setState, until React literally decides it's random. You have no idea when this will be. React's like, I'll do it later. And eventually it's like, okay, I guess I got to do this for you. And it does. It says, oh, well, count now is 1 greater than it was before. I will go ahead and re-render for you. So let's see an example. We're going to have this call another function called doNothing, which is going to do exactly that. Now if increment causes a render again, and doNothing does not. Because it did not change state. React does not care, will not re-render, doesn't matter what's going on the screen. You didn't tell it to change state, there's no reason to re-render. As soon as I do this, boom, re-rendered. Boom, 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 we're good. Nothing, 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 nothing. Count's not changing, nothing. Boom, we re-rendered. Render's not being called, obviously, because we have a console log write in render. Questions on state and how it works? Why is it right here? Because this is a variable that, or this is like a member of the class. It's the same as these functions that are part of the class. It's literally just a variable that's part of the class. So it doesn't need to be defined with let or const. You could also do something like and then you could console, and that would work. So this is just part of the class. It's not a variable, an actual variable or anything. It just happens to be a member of that class. That's why.
So then any variable in the class, you don't have to declare it?
If it's at this scope, yeah. If it's in the class scope itself, then sure, you don't have to declare it with a letter or const. If it's in here, you do.
Can you console?
No. You can't console log the class itself. You could technically console log right here, I think. Which won't tell you much, but you can. It literally gives you the function that it's generating. So a class generates a function, a prototype function under the hood. This is what it's generated. So you're not going to see anything you want to see. You're going to see a literal function written out as text. Not particularly helpful. Any other questions? We can only take a 10-minute break today, so let's be back at 8:20. Wednesdays a little harder than Mondays. Yeah. Next week's. Yeah, there's a lot. Monday was pretty slow. Kind of eased into it. Today's like, oh, here's all the stuff.
Alright, so
And it's only gonna get
now we've got that kind of
It's not that it's hard, it's just like,
Let's go back to here. We're expert.
probably.
So
The good news is, unlike other cohorts, we get an extra week to work on React.
this is the artist.
So
This is the
we'll get
single.
more to do.
Is it?
More to do on this. But we have this one, and then Saturday you're gonna get into doing things like Ajax calls and stuff. So it does build very fast. But the good news about the extra week is you can kind of slow down and go back and say, okay, well, what are the things that we don't quite get yet? And JJ is like making that content, so I have no problem just fudging the content at all and doing what we need to do to make sure people get it.
Inside of this wall or this table. Right. So you're actually creating a
Right, Peyton?
of result.
Yeah. You like React?
Then,
We can.
right, remember this is a
Well,
this is a
hard,
so
though.
we're doing
It is
is
hard.
saying, we're gonna
I warned you
wait
guys,
until
don't
we
believe me.
create with the
Just like the flow of it is just like different.
It's very different.
Yeah.
We're gonna wait until that's finished.
Kinda hard to
Then
walk sometimes.
we're gonna call this
It's
back
very
up.
different. You until you have a really, really good grasp of JavaScript, it's hard to just intuitively understand what React is doing.
Yeah.
And even then, it's so different.
When this is done, then we're gonna do this. If there's an error, we're gonna catch it. Right? So what comes into
Did
this
you
call
swear
function
that-
right here inside the document,
Wait, it
there's
is?
gonna be an error.
Is it do side?
So you're that's why
What?
you can do error. You can do
What
error,
homework?
you can do
19?
PR, if you want to.
It says it's due today on Amswat.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. We forgot to
But you didn't get any
tell you guys about it. So we're gonna have it due Saturday.
Remember, this is just a
Wait, tonight told my business due tonight?
No, because we never said anything about it.
So
We totally forgot to.
basically,
If there's
what's
nothing in our lesson
happening-
plans to go for homework anymore, they just leave it out. And they expect you to just do it or something? I don't know.
I mean, I figure that every Wednesday, when we finish something, the next Wednesday.
I mean, it's a good thing to figure, you're right.
I mean, that's how it's been all semester.
Yeah.
It's actually not.
No, we're gonna give everyone a grace period, but the next one we haven't gone over and we're not going to in class. You just gotta go figure it out.
I feel a little better than I was like trying to do it all today. I was like, I was like, get my flu and rating. I got like a clear, but I can't do anything else right now. It's like, I don't know what year, but they should tell you it needs, I remember the operation.
Do you know anything about the new format of the class they're gonna start doing?
No, what happened?
They're doing it 100% live online.
Oh yeah, I was gonna be the pilot program of that.
Oh, really?
So originally I was gonna lead that, and then they said, hey, we just fired you, we need some fill-in for.
I called the Apple store a little while ago. I think they said it needs, you know, like.
I-
Hard.
Yeah, I had concerns about it, and I had concerns going in too, because being through the cohort already and seeing how people learn, I was like, they're gonna have to be really good.
I mean, they have to have 2 monitors.
At least,
Yeah.
and they gotta be ready to fucking rock.
I feel bad. I feel bad for the
It's about, my biggest concern, even with streaming at home, is like,
I can't
the
stream at home.
delay of
I can't
being
do
able to
it.
ask you a question to get a response.
Yeah.
Is killer. I know it's like not being
Yeah,
able
I
to,
do it.
hey,
I'm
how
sure
did
the
this
55 numbers. People are like, what's it? Why was he just typing in numbers?
Yeah, true. It's different, and it's gonna be a lot harder for students. A lot harder. So either they have to be way more selective in who they let in, they have to let people in with experience or something,
Or they have to drop it to like half staff.
yeah. They're gonna have to be ready.
Fuck, dude.
So someone told me, a friend was talking to one of the other guys.
I'm having a hard time.
One of the other guys who went through it, he's like, you need to make sure Charlie knows that anyone who fails is not your fault. It's gonna be impossible for the instructor to succeed.
Yeah, like you have to gauge how your class is doing. Like, we barely respond in person. You're gonna get 20 people to be typing Slack. Oh yeah, no, I don't get it. Like,
Yeah,
No.
but
I'm gonna buy it
if
right
can you
now.
imagine trying to answer all those questions and like, what about TAs?
Yeah, the same. They had the same number of TAs and everything.
Yeah, but
It's
still,
weird.
that's gonna be a logistics.
I have no idea how they're gonna do it. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. The only advantage was I didn't have to drive, the 2 hours a day or whatever for this shit. But
You're gonna end up with one group at the end of the billboard too. So that's one 4-person group.
Yeah,
Guaranteed 50%
probably.
By
It's
week 1! No, HTML and CSS, you gotta get that shit with the pre-work. Yeah, okay, so the week they get to week 4, boom! Fist of 5, completely fisted with 2 fists.
we all just got fisted. All right, let's jump back into it. I know these lessons are way harder. We're going way faster today than we did on Monday. Monday, we kind of eased into it. Hey, here's JSX. Hey, here's HTML. And today, we're like, okay, here's everything else in React. So I get it. We're going fast, and I know. The good news is we have an extra week in React that other cohorts didn't get because we've decided, JJ agreed that the Java week is just BS, and we don't need to waste our time with it. So we're going to do an extra week of React, and with that, what's going to happen is we're going to get custom curriculum. And, you know, if we have to veer off course to go back and redress things, that's cool with me. You know, anyway, to be realistic, when we get to this React week, we have, what, 5 weeks left? They ain't going to fire me. So if I got to do what I got to do to make sure you guys get React at school. So we'll make it work, right? So don't worry. We're going to get through these lessons. We're going to make it work. We're going to... Wow. Week 23. Damn. That was a burn. I'll give you that.
No, that was a joke.
No, I know. So anyway, yeah, we're going to make it through this. It's going to be tough. Saturday's going to be tough. Next Monday, next Wednesday are going to be hard. I'm not going to lie to you. They're only going to get harder than this. So that's just how it is. But then we'll have another week when we get back from the holidays and all that to just kind of like chill, think about it. Hey, what's hard? How can we make this more solid? Maybe we'll take the activities and extend them out so we can have like a long project or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but we'll be good at React by the end of that last week. And we're going to start that last week of React. Day 1, that Saturday, I'll be teaching, and then we're going to get a week and a half off. So you'll have, you know, plenty of time to let it percolate in your brain how React is working. Or forget all of it. I don't know. Whatever. We'll see. So, all right. Let's get back into it. Let's get back into this state exercise because I want to show you a couple more things before you guys jump onto your next activity. So, we have a state activity to work with that friend thing that we did earlier again. And then we're going to talk about forms a little bit, but we're probably not going to have time to do the form exercise. So I want to make sure you guys get state as best you can so that we can work on this last activity together, get it done, and then I can show you forms. We can start to dabble with forms, and you can worry about that at home if you want, or Saturday you can come in with the heavy questions for Daniel and really put him through the ringer, right? That'll be funny. Anyway, we've got this activity that we were just working on. Increment. Increments do nothing. It does nothing. Let's add another button to change the state. So I added the little literal string here to separate the buttons so it looks a little nicer. Why don't we add a decrement button? We'll make this button danger button. And we'll call this handle decrement. We'll just copy this. And this is going to be -1. Let's add our console logs. I'm going to call this increment clicked. This is going to be decrement clicked. So now, there we go, there's that. If you want to look at it really quick. Here we should have 3 buttons. Let's open up the DevTools. Rendering, okay, so we're rendering nothing. The 0 initial state. Increment was clicked, it's still 0, and then we render again, it's 1. Click decrement. Decrement was clicked, state was 1. When we render again, state is 0. Notice that it follows the same rules in that it doesn't actually render until after the state was set, right? And the state is not set in that same function. when we're calling handle decrement and handle increment, it hasn't reconciled the state changes yet. Yeah, prints negative number and everything. It's nice, huh? Nice formatting. All right. So what if we want to add another piece of state that's not, you know, this increment, this count, right? We're going to call this toggle. Toggle is going to be set to true. This one's going to be the click count right here. We'll call this toggle. This.state.toggle. Now, toggle is always going to be true. For now. We look at it, toggle is nothing. Awesome. Toggle should be true. Did I spell something wrong? We'll have it print on or off because apparently true is not coming on through. Alright, so toggle is on. Now remember these functions. I'm going to move these side by side so we can kind of see this all happening at once. Remember, handle increment and handle decrement. This little object that we can pass in changes count. But notice there's nothing there for toggle. Nothing at all. And because of that, it does nothing with toggle. Toggle stays exactly the same. And if in rendering, we just print out the state, so you can see, aw man. Or actually, even better. I will do JSON.stringify. I'm going to JSON stringify the state. Okay. So now you can see count is 0, toggle is true. When it goes back to render again, count is 1, toggle is true. Nothing does nothing. Now a decrement count is 0, toggle is still true. Okay, so now we know that when we want to change a piece of state with set state, we only need to tell it what pieces of state are actually changing. So in this case, count is changing. Forget about toggle. I don't care about it. It's not going to change. However, if I add another button, yet another button, this one can be, we're going to make this a button warning. So it's yellow. And this one is going to, again, print our little toggle logic that we have here. But it's going to be opposite because we want to tell it if it's on, we're going to toggle it off. If it's off, we're going to toggle it on. Okay, so toggle off. Now this one is going to be handle toggle. Toggle clicked. This will print out our toggle. And right here, we can set toggle equal to this.state.toggle. And if you just put the exclamation point in front of it, it'll reverse it. So here, I'm not saying to do anything with count. Forget count. We don't care. But I can change toggle. And it re-renders. Toggle isn't changing when I decrement. Toggle isn't changing when I increment. Count isn't changing when I toggle. So I'm telling it what pieces of state to change. Now I also want to change count because I'm crazy and I want to ruin everyone's day. I'm just going to add a random thing in here and accidentally change the state. Now when I toggle, both have changed. Whoops, they're not going to like that though. Why when I toggle the state on count changes? I don't know. Oops, that was a mistake. Turns out I'm accidentally updating the count when I probably shouldn't be. Point being, it's quite easy to change one little piece of state. And to change it however you want. This could be anything. This state could be an array. This state could be an object in an object. And you could change any bit of it as long as it matches the original shape of the first state. Any questions on the state stuff? Notice too how easy it is to just change the display here. Like, look at how easy that is compared to jQuery. jQuery, you gotta grab the button and do all this dumb stuff. In this one, it's just like right there in front of you. It's like writing the code. You know, the code writes itself almost. Questions on the state? Cool. We are going to now jump to activity 16. You're going to revisit that friend assignment. You're going to have to do some refactoring to a single component. So we're going to have Krusty Krab, Mr. Krab, SpongeBob, Squidward, whatever. You're going to refactor to a single component. You're going to use the map. You're going to do all that fun stuff. And then you're going to have to create the friend card as, or create the app as a stateful component. And you're going to have to give it the friends array as a piece of state. And then you're going to have to make it so when you click on one of the friends, it is removed from state. So this one's going to be very, very tricky. So work with partners. Definitely work with partners. And if you get stuck, let one of us know, because I want you to finish this activity. This is a really good one to get through, because understanding state is very important. Okay? So this is activity 16. Work with a group. Ask us questions. Let's get it done.
How much time are we gonna have? Are we gonna have more than like 5 minutes?
You're going to have 20 minutes on this one.
Like before when we were using Node to run our server that would render everything, like where is the server running when we use React? Like is it?
This is all on the UI. There's no server. All on the front end. That's what's amazing about it. Isn't that amazing? I think it's amazing.
Then how does Yarn spins it up?
So there is Browserify, I think, something like that, whatever it's called. It sits in the background with this React Create app that runs it for the hot reloading. But all of the stuff you're seeing is browser only. No server-side communication yet. We don't get to that until, I think, Saturday you might get to that. Yeah, activity 15 I skipped. So, this is 16. 15 I kind of bundled into that explanation because I wanted you guys to see it rather than play with it so you could work on this one.
it went from just like SpongeBob, Mr. Krabs, and Squidward to like all of my favorite childhood classic television shows. Yeah. Courage the Cowardly Dog, Rocco, Johnny Bravo, Captain Planet. Yeah. Well, and also Doug. It's from Real Monty. That was my jam.
They just don't make kid shows the same anymore.
They really don't. What's funny is, like, as an adult, if you look back at all of these television shows, you find all the hidden innuendos. Yeah, I know.
Rocco's Modern Life,
That's a dirty show.
Especially Rocco's Modern Life.
Well, after work was phone sex.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Rocco did. You did both. I don't.
One of them did, yeah.
Oh, Ren and Stimpy was also another bad.
That one didn't hide it though.
Yeah.
That was like purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just straight on told you those things.
Well, I copied this. Yeah, I copied the map function from the first time I did it. That's how I got all these guys out.
Wait, so you already got that report?
Number one.
Yeah. That's what I had to do.
You just go to your app and then delete all the friends that are there. And just make map one. So you do an open parentheses friends.map, then map it to a new array, and then return one card to the name equal to friend.name. It was exercise 11 of them. And if you still have that file in there. Well, it's the one that Carson slapped out. Put that under your H1. Actually, that back component for the glass is something. Yeah,
See that 6-door handle fix? Sorry, you have to call back off.
Wait, did they actually fix it?
They put it on, but already it comes all the way off. So like it's just one good tug.
But do they not go right up?
I don't know. They like half fix the door. Like this is good enough. They won't bitch this anymore. You do that. I'll go downstairs.
Now that there's a woman, I'm not gonna bail you out. We should just steal the woman's bathroom door.
If you can go do that like across trouble, why not just fix
I'm gonna
the
get
door
duct
in
tape
the
on
bro?
Just put a doorstop and leave it open all the time.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Well, just, you know, someone might walk in there.
You want a blind?
The smell like
The smell.
Hey, you always remember it. You guys remember that boot camp 20 years ago when that kid kept going to the women's restroom?
Peeping Dwarfs?
Yeah, that's true.
I'm gonna go to the women's, I'll sit down too, but there's no girl.
There. Last I checked, no, there aren't. You're right about that.
You know for sure. You know you don't have to sit down. That's not your way.
It's not a prereq, right? That's why
You just instead of having function app, you just change that to render, and then you just at the top of it you add class app extend. You add that. I guess keep the app, otherwise you have to change the export to whatever you want.
That's all you do to get that today? Or you just set something? I got an error and I just didn't get
Well, really, the only thing like mainly what I did was just wrap that whole function in that class, and then I just changed the function to render instead of something else. I'm gonna show my workspace. Yeah, but I mean, if you want it, I was gonna say if you want it, just send you mine, like compare the differences.
One, two, three, four, 5 of them.
Yeah, same, 5.
So you have 2 returns. Right.
Oh wait. Oh, the C component we have, right?
Of course it's not one thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, of course it has to be. Oh, now we need to use this state right?
Well, So it says it promotes only the initial state of the friend's shape mount. So it might work. Yeah, friends.json. I mean, that's where we're pulling data from. They were importing it in app too, and pull the data file.
Yeah, but like when you're the array that you're mapping over is that friends JSON.
Then we have to set the state to that JSON file also.
Set the component's initial state.
So you just do like state equals friends or something. Oh, good.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So outside of the render, you would do a state equals and then set friends to this. Oh, okay, yeah. You set the state of friends to the friends array. I did state equals an object of friends equal to friends. Yeah, and then it's below where we're calling name equals friend dot name. Don't reference friend anymore. You want to reference this this dot state dot text like name.
Okay.
Map over this dot state dot friends to render. Oh wait. So instead of doing map dot friends or friends dot map, you would do this dot state dot friends dot map. I did. Yeah, and then you map it to a new array. Yeah, that works.
Where you're going to
So do state equals friends, set it to friends, then this dot state dot friends dot map. Oh, don't change this dot state dot name. Because you're still mapping it to the array.
the stuff has to stay the same.
Right, because your friend variable now is your the data you map to the array.
So it's still that.
Then you're changing where you're mapping from.
Like that.
How many guys do you have on your Oh, I have 5 across. It's like my little shit, right?
Is it just like zoomed out or something?
No, yeah, mine was like that. Yeah. I'm not zoomed out though. Wait, if I'm at normal zoom, I only have 3 across. If I'm at 100, I'm at 5 across. That's weird. It's probably got more screen real estate, but yeah.
Okay. Let's go over this one. Fist 5, how was this exercise? It's pretty tough.
Getting there, kinda.
This one was tough? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was a lot of steps here. There's a lot of refactoring you could do on this one. But let's go ahead and walk through it together. So, first thing we need to do is take the friend card, and we need to use a map to render all of the friends in that friends JSON with one tight little loop, right? So, we're going to do that first. Then what we need to do is add the friends to the state, and we need to turn the app into a stateful component so that we can manage the friends. Then the last thing we're going to do is have the ability to remove a friend from the list. So, here's our friends list. Nice. The first thing we need to do is create a map. So we can map over all of the friends, because if we open up that JSON, there's like 15 of them now. But we're only showing 3, and I don't really want to paste this 15 times or whatever. So we're going to do an expression. We need the curly braces. And we can just do friends.map. And we actually don't need the curly braces here. Instead of curly braces, if you do parentheses, you'll be able to just return the component. So let's make this friend. I'll delete all this. And then right here, these friend cards, should just be able to dump them. No need. This re-renders, and we have all of our friends. Now it's important to do these one step at a time, right? So we want to get the map working first, test it, make sure it worked. It looks like it did. Then we can go ahead and now turn app into a stateful component. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? Cool. So, this right here, this function app, kind of serves as the render function of what we're going to have. Of our class that we're making, right? So we need it to still be called app, and it needs to extend the React.component so that it can actually be a React component. And this function here, now it's called render. I can get rid of the function keyword. I can just pick it up with a Control X, paste it in, and it should still render the same. However, it's a class. So we've got the class part, right? So halfway done with the refactor. The next part is we need to set the friends in the state. So we can do state equals friends. Okay, now we think we've set it, but just to verify, if we do this dot friends, it should still render. Oh, it exploded. What a bummer. Alright, so friends is, oh yeah, this state. Good call, Nor.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I didn't work fine.
Yeah, this dot state. My bad. My bad. Hey, we all make mistakes. Alright, so now we have the friends. It still renders fine. Good. Okay, we have the friends in the state. And if you want to verify for sure, you can call this friends list or something so that they're not the same, so that you would have to reference friends list to get them. So that way, now we know for sure, absolutely, it's in the state. Great. The last bit of functionality was that we needed to have the ability to remove friends when we click on that X. So what do we need? If we go look at the friends, we have the X right here. So we're going to need a click handler, right? The real question is, where should this click handler go? That's a good question, isn't it? Does anyone have an idea of where we need this click handler to go? In the, like, where are we going to write this function? In the span?
Yeah, where the button is. So that's where you're like throwing, and then you're on to go,
Equals do what?
remove
Remove what?
Oh, the ID of a friend.
Remove the ID of the friend?
Yeah, it says to remove the friend by you have to take the ID of that.
Okay. But how do I remove it? From the state. So we have a friend. Our props, they effectively are the friends. So you can do props.id. What am I removing it from? What am I removing? Where are these friends coming from? They're coming from here. They're in the state. I need to get it out of the state. This is where all the state is. And this friend card has no access to that state. It doesn't care about the state. It doesn't know about the state. It just knows it has a friend. And you're going to click a button, and the friend's going to disappear. So that being said, because the state's here, we know that we have to change the state from here. We know that. We have to, logically. So we can do it here. We know we're going to need the ID. We're going to need some way to identify the friends removed. What can we do to quickly and easily remove something from an array? We need to search the array to find that thing, and then we need to remove it. What if we do a filter where it is anything but the ID we're looking for? So if we do this .state.friends.filter, ID, where the ID does not equal the ID we're looking for. So we're going to get back all of the friends except for the one that we specifically are trying not to get, right? So the one that's being passed in here, the one that should be removed. Now we can call this .setState with the new friends. And that's all well and good, but this still doesn't work, does it? So we have this function that takes in an ID and removes the friends from the friends list. How can we call it from the friend card?
Props, remove friend.
How do I get it in the props? Export it? I can export it from the middle of a component? Nope, I can't. But I can pass whatever I want
Oh yeah.
as props, right? What's to stop me from doing this? Didn't work. Oop. I forgot something. We need a key. Right? We're rendering a list of stuff. Oof. Now that's still not working. So now there's an error. We have a key. We're calling the remove friend function.
Instead of props.id, we just remove the key props.key.
That is a good question. Instead of props.id, couldn't we just move the key? You can't get to the key. I don't think so. That's a good question, actually. Now I don't know. You can, but it turns into... these shouldn't be undefined. Interesting. So let's see what's going on here then. I guess we got to debug it. For some reason it's not. Let's go to sources. If we go to the app, IDs coming in as undefined. Oh, duh. I'm not passing the ID through the props. So I've got the key. The key is the ID, but we still need to pass the ID through the props. So that's a common enough bug. You forget to pass something in through the props, and now everyone can be removed. My button?
Yeah, props out of new friends is not
How are you passing it in? You'd have to see what this looks like. Make sure it's all set up properly, because there's something you're missing.
Oh, I didn't follow new friends.
Oh, that'll do it. Alright, any questions on this example? Back to index. And Stephanie or Chris will Slack out the solution to this in a moment too, so you can look at it.
So how is it when you read? Oh, because we're not modifying the arrays, and when you reload the page off the back,
Yep.
so only moving them from the back.
Yep, we would have to alter the JSON file every time we clicked if we really wanted them gone, which we can't do. Alright, any other questions? Any questions on this? We gotta jump to the next example. Alright. So let me move this. Boom. Remove this. Alright, so we've looked at a ton of stuff so far today. An absolute massive amount of stuff, I know. It's been pretty wild. But we have one more concept we want to cover. That we do have an activity for, but you're not going to have time to do it in class because we have a checkpoint we have to do. So I'm going to go over forms. We're going to do a checkpoint. Then I'm going to tell you about a bunch of homeworks. So you're not leaving after the checkpoint either. So don't just pack up and go. Okay. So forms. We've looked at state. We've looked at props. We've looked at a whole bunch of stuff. Now the ultimate use of state comes in the form of a form. And forms are not too different from what we've seen. We've seen, you know, a handle, like a handle changed when we click and stuff like that. But there are different events we can hook into. Like we have the on clicks we've hooked into, now we can handle into on changes. For like a text box, for instance. So, this component is called a form, and it literally wraps an HTML form. Alright? And your inputs that you use aren't too different from what we've seen before. So when you're writing out a form in React, you can write it out just like you would in jQuery or regular HTML, whatever. Just remember that setting values and all that now has to be done with the curly braces, because you can just inject the literal value directly into the form. You don't got to do any weird jQuery hackery to get it to work. And your onChanged handler, instead of doing the on change and then the function, is now just like the onClick, where you just pass on in a function and voila, it works. Now notice the state here. It has values for all of the inputs. So there's a first name and a last name. In this particular state, the value names are the same as the control names. And that's a pretty good practice. So if your input's name is first name, your state's property value that is related to that input's value should also be called first name. Spelled the same way, same casing, everything. And the reason why is it makes it really easy for us to change state. You can have a really compact function that does it kind of dynamically for you. You don't necessarily have to worry about the headache of mapping up, oh, is this the first name that's changing or the last name? So let's kind of see what this looks like. I'm going to console log some stuff out. Let me make sure it's running. So here's our form. It's a nice, pretty little form. You can see it's changing up everything there. I can say, hello, Carson Howard, and I can reset the state. The page never refreshed. There were no refreshes here. This was all done with React. React just magically kept it all there, did a whole bunch of work for you. Keeps it on the page. When we hit submit, we tell it, it's time to start over. So how do these work? Well, if you look, we have the initial values of our state directly piped into the value of the input, right? So our state starts as the empty names, first name and last name. We just simply put this state first name with the literals there, the JSX variables, directly into the value. And that's your initial state. The onChange is connected to a handle input change function, and this one takes in an event similar to jQuery. It's the same event. We're using the same event in React that we would in jQuery or regular JavaScript. Nothing has changed. And from that event, we're going to have the target object, right? And in the event target, you can pull a bunch of stuff off. Specifically, you can pull the value at that time. You can pull the name of the control. All of that fun stuff. And then what we're able to do is dynamically set, based off the control name, the new value and state. And I'll show you how this works. We can go ahead and console.log name and value, and we'll see how it can change the state here based off of the name, which it will automatically determine based off of this variable here. That's what this syntax is. When you wrap the property name, and it's a variable wrapped in brackets as the property name, it actually evaluates that variable for the name. So, for instance, we change first name, name will log out to first name, and this will end up saying first name and changing the value there. So, if we go ahead and look at this, we open up the console, we check it out, first name and C. So, right here, first name and C. Meanwhile, this changes the state. So again, I'm going to make this a little nicer. We'll say the control is name, and the new value is value. Then we're also going to say console.log state is JSON stringify the state, and then here in the render we're gonna say rendering, so we can see this loop in action. Alright, so rendering, first name and last name is nothing. That's our initial state, right? I'm gonna type a C. Whole bunch of stuff happened. The control is first name and the new value is C. The state is the same as it was in the render, and then when we call rendering again, there's a C in first name. So right here, does this make a little bit more sense what's going on in this function? People are okay with this function? It's a nice convenient way that if you had a bunch of inputs, you could easily just wrap them all with one function. Magically, your state's going to be updated for all of those properties. If I continue to type, notice the last name is not changing at all. But now, I start typing the last name, the control is last name, the new value is how. The first name hasn't changed at all in the last few changes because they're all related to the last name. And you can see how the rendering always happens. The new state doesn't happen until the render comes back, right? So that same loop still applies. Doesn't matter what we're changing in state, until that render happens again, we're not going to have that new state. Now, handle form submit. This happens when we click submit. Our usual friend, event.preventDefault, is back because React does not want the page to reload. If the page reloads, we start fresh. So if we don't have this, all that fun we just did, woo, woo, it actually refreshed the entire page. Now, there's a slight distinction here, and it's kind of hard to see, right? Because there's a whole lot going on. But notice, our trick here is the console, and what the console's logging. It re-rendered again, right here, with the new empty first name and last name, because we're setting state. However, in the other example, it restarted the whole thing, refreshed the whole thing, and you could see that because the console was just, boom, cleared, and it re-rendered the basic state. If we want to test that theory some more, we can set it to some random value here when we reset. Boom. Event prevent default's working. Again, I go ahead and comment that out. It did it real quick, but then the event prevent default took place and it refreshed the page. It does not call the render, it calls React, or React will, yeah, it calls React and says, look, I have a state change that's pending. When React goes through its render cycle and says, I'm going to try to re-render everything, it checks if there's any state changes. If it finds a state change, it will call render again for that component. Just that component. It's pretty complicated. I wouldn't worry about it right now. Just know that if you set state, it's going to re-render the component. So if you were trying to get stuff to just hang out here and stay forever and you call set state, you're going to re-render it. There's another important thing. Calling set state calls render. What happens if I call set state in render? That's bad.
I guess my question was set state is what triggers the render, right?
Eventually it causes the render, yes. But remember, it does not change state immediately. That is what's really, really important. But yes, every time you call it, it calls render. So now we're changing the state. It does not like that. It's actually stopping us, which is really nice. Well, it's stopping us because there's a Stack Overflow.
Infinite loops.
It infinite loops itself on the renders because it keeps changing the state. At least it tries to, but it can't because it keeps rendering. What? If you, what do you mean?
So say that you have first name or first names is an array of names with yes and party, and add one. That re-render it. Because you haven't actually communicated the object.
If you don't call set state, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but what if inside the set state you know put.
So
Yeah, this dot set state.
say we have that, like that, right?
Yeah, and then yes equals this dot state dot yes dot pair put, then we pass in one name. Right? I'm actually asking you to write
So this will call a set state because names is now different. it's not different here, but this value that's coming through is different. And because of that, and because you called the set state, we'll have the same problem. So, again, now, if I don't call set state yet, it doesn't matter. It's set state that's the trick. You cannot call set state from render at all, ever. You're going to have a whole heaping load of fun if you do that. And what's even trickier is if you're calling functions that call set state, they can't be called from render, can they? Because they're going to call set state. So, don't do that. It's bad.
Could we call the render function without changing the set state?
No, you cannot call the render function. It will do nothing.
But it has to exist for set state.
It has to exist for React to even work.
Right.
And set state eventually calls render again. If there's no render function, you're not rendering anything. What's the point of the component? But if you call render, you're going to get the React JSX back. What are you going to do with it?
So if we do a get request, the data we get back has to change the set state.
Yes. Absolutely. Alright, so it's about to get wacky. So in here, you end up getting the entire React object back. But it doesn't do anything because you're not using it. You know, you're not actually re-rendering anything. React would do that, right? So you can call it all you want. Not going to do you any good, though. So, there's no reason for you to call render ever. Any other questions on this fun example with forms? Again, on change, checkboxes on clicked or unchecked. The select boxes, I think, have like the drop downs and stuff have like a, they might have an on change, they might have like a selection change, I forget exactly. But all of those same events that we would use in jQuery exist now on React in this kind of format, right? Lowercase on, capital, click. So you can hook into any one of them if they exist on the form control. It's as simple as looking up HTML for what exists, or you can look at the React docs and see what events exist. On blur, that's another one, right? So when you lose focus, that can call React and do stuff. There's on focus or set focus or something, whatever the opposite of blur is. Unblur, I don't know. Is it just focus? So on focus. There's key up, key down, all those guys. They all exist.
Like a million of them.
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
On scroll, on drag.
Mouse click, all that fun stuff.
Copy on
Point is,
cover.
any one of these you can hook into, and this is the gist of a basic form. Any questions on this basic form? We are going to do a Mongo checkpoint. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to do it for, you have 10 minutes to do it, and then I briefly got to talk about homework. I'll be real quick so you can get out of here because it'll be 9:30. So, TAs are going to slack out a checkpoint for Mongo. Please do it. There you go. What's up?
Paula.
There are kind of like two different planes of existence there. You were thinking about the render, and I was thinking just outside of state, outside of render.
So does it cause it to re-render if we just mutate the object, or does it?
It only calls it to re-render if you call set state.
Okay.
And the state is different that you pass it. So you can change state all you want, and I'm gonna do anything.
Yeah, but I wasn't. I'm saying if we.
If you take
Outside of the render.
take the array out of state, for instance, right? Is this what you're saying? The one that's in state, and you just change that array.
No, well, what I'm saying is if you follow this dot set state on the array, right, and you mutate that array, you don't make a new array. You leave the same one intact, right, because it's still referring to that same array, but you just push an object into it. So if you do like a this dot set state name is equal to this dot
it
state
won't
dot
cause a
name.
re-render.
That's because you're just mutating, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And you need a new reference to a new array.
Yeah, I had a huge problem with that in a shopping cart that I made, and I couldn't figure that out until just now. That's when I just now realized that like the reason it wasn't re-rendering is because it was mutating the data.
Yeah. Yep. It gets tricky.
That one small thing.
At least I'm pretty confident. If we
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
let's go in here and let's not do this. Let's just say, so we're gonna do this dot state dot names dot push, just some crap, and then we'll just call this dot set state empty, like so, just to see if the mutation changes anything. Oh, it does.
Okay. Wait, what are you doing? You're doing this dot state dot names dot push.
It does do it. Yeah.
So it re-renders?
Mm-hmm. As long as you call set state, it re-renders it.
Wow. Okay.
You must do a deep comparison. Cause see, it's adding this to state every time.
Wow. Okay.
Interesting. Well, the more you know.
Yeah, the more you know. Well, I'll have to figure that out. I haven't really messed with it in about 6 months because it was something I built a long time ago. But
Yeah.
it's a question that's just really stuck with me. So I couldn't get it to re-render, but I was also passing state. So basically, I had two separate components, and so I was setting state from one, and then I would pass the state back down into the other.
Oh, I see.
So I'm not sure if that was maybe part of it.
Could have been. Maybe you were getting tangled somewhere.
But it was kind of, yeah, it was kind of because, React has that one-way data binding and stuff. So basically, it was just like this gobbledygook mess. And I learned about hierarchical components and a few other things that have made it like more sensible.
Yeah.
So, and especially even Redux. I want to integrate Redux, but at the same time, it's like, is it really worth integrating Redux because it's kind of a small application?
Damn, probably not.
But yeah. Did you want me to go over the homework or you did?
I'm just gonna tell them about it.
Okay.
I'm not even gonna go over it.
And then the checkpoint. Do you want to do that with us? The checkpoint review?
Yeah, if people want to stay, you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we just do what we normally did. If no one wants to stay, then.
Okay.
Yeah, same. Like, holy crap.
You got through it. I mean, we all you finished.
What's the difference between drop and remove?
Drop blows the whole thing away, I'm pretty sure.
So it's removed.
No, remove removes items. Drop blows the whole thing away. Like literally removes it completely from the database at all. If you can even call it on there. You might only be able to call it
So
on...
remove just removes the entries in the collection.
Yeah, I don't even know if you can call drop on a collection, but if you can, it would drop the whole collection. As in, completely destroy it.
Yeah, like one of the questions was a collection can be removed with the drop. I selected remove.
You can drop a collection, but it also removes the indexes and all that stuff. Remove won't remove indexes. It'll just remove the items. Drop is like, blow it away, it's gone.
The most he could do as far as it's like a laptop.
Anyone still working on the quiz? No? Okay. So, if you want to hang out after, Chris will be going over the answers to that if you want to see them. If you don't feel like you have to. So, first of all, week 18, we never covered the homework. We never even mentioned it. Yeah, it was on Bootcamp Spot. I think that might be why they took it out of the lessons, because they expect you to look at Bootcamp Spot. But I don't totally know. So, anyway, we're not going to make it due tonight. We're going to make it due Saturday. Because we never talked about it, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. However, it's on GitLab. Go look at the instructions. I'm not going to read them. You're all smart. But we also have a week 19 homework that is due next Wednesday, I believe. Right, Stephanie? Yep. So that one's not being extended, so double down on your homeworks, I guess. And both of these got to be deployed to Heroku. This week 19 homework is going to have to do with React, so it's going to be a lot more challenging, I think. But yeah, this week's homework pushed to Saturday. The Mongo scraping homework. Next week homework still on Wednesday. All right.
Thank you.
No problem. With that being said, class is officially over. So if you want to leave